Hello again, Mark Wolf here. We've already talked about how music was a key driver in our producing The Orchard, but it's also won accolades in a film festival award for best cinematography. This segment is about how this happened and what it might mean for others wanting to dive into film production and do the shooting justice. Now, we've been saying all along that our experience with The Orchard was of a project that started out on one set of expectations, only to have the film demand it be something bigger and better than originally conceived, which included tapping into Calgary-based nighttime photographer Cameron McKillican and some stunning drone work by local photographer Marty Agabob. And I think it's instructive how the gear and overall approach to principal photography was a significant part of that evolution. To start then, and just very briefly, we already had a high-definition broadcast video cam that we'd been using for corporate and community video work. And we knew we'd need to move to something a little bit more cinematic. And as it turns out, our drone operator at the beginning of production, Jonathan Blackwood out of Lethbridge, Alberta, had an old Blackmagic 2.7K cinema camera that he wanted to move along. By the way, Jonathan is the one who captured those iconic drone shots of the grandfather arriving at the orchard that opens the film, along with that wonderful score Carrie put together using public domain NASA sounds of Jupiter and whatnot. So we used that camera in the very first scene we shot on our own, the so-called Hubert and Jack arrival scene that was heavily inspired by the zoom shot we keep referring to of Sean Penn walking down a road in Amish country in the important film At Close Range. We were also lucky to get a stinking hot day where the heat waves can be seen coming off the road, and our two dogs, Keaton and Ash, performing perfectly as the sentinels of evil barreling toward the viewer as Hubert looms up in the background. And why is this significant? Well, it was in ingesting and color grading this first footage that we realized we were into something much more cinematic and compelling than we had originally intended. And so it began, eventually leading to our purchasing both the 4K and 6K Blackmagic Design Pocket cinema cams using a full slate of L-series Canon glass that I had acquired over the years of full-frame street and landscape photography. Now, what this meant is that for Exaphoria, which we shot this summer and is now in post-production, we were able to hit the ground running. And up next is Hexa, the sequel proper to The Orchard. And from a strictly gear perspective, we'd of course love to have the funds to move to something more polished in terms of imaging. And here I'm thinking of something like the Alexa 35 with a proper set of PL primes, although I'm also tempted by the new full-frame 6K from Blackmagic that might be perfectly fine for Hexa, especially since that project has already started shooting and will require a lot more night shooting.
What part?
You know, about the same time that girl went missing from Marysville, Amanda Running Horse?
Yeah, that's too bad, but she turned up though, right?
Nope.
The problem with equipment, of course, is that it's like a drug. You always want the latest, greatest, and the best camera that you can get. Until I see shots like this from our filming of Exaphoria this summer, and wondering if a Canon 300 or an Alexa 35 decked out with high-end Zeiss primes really would have made that much difference. And my response is not appreciably. This was shot with my 4K Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera with a $1,000 Lumix zoom. It just doesn't get much better than this, underscoring the old chestnut, it's not the camera, it's the photographer. The far more important learning from producing The Orchard for us was to let the universe guide you with gifts and pointers. Consider this painting given to us by local painter Alison Masters, who woke up one morning to find it hanging on the side of her house, and to whom I occurred as the only person who would not only appreciate the sheer weirdness of this act, but who might be able to use the thing somehow. And we did, introducing it as a kind of a one-off inside joke for this scene when Lucas and Kate's landlord brings it over as a housewarming gift for the couple.
Oh, hey, did you remember to get ham? Yeah. I had the weirdest encounter with our landlord out there.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
tell me about weird.
The painting effectively asserted itself, taking on a life of its own, becoming an act of retribution in the scene when Kate and Lucas have had a terrible argument, and even becoming a template image for a signature scene in the movie that we called The Forest Creature.
It takes more than heat to stay warm in the winter.
Or consider this opening title sequence from David Cronenberg's Dead Ringers. The dreamlike panning of surgical tools becoming something of a working idea for what we thought we might do with cherry trees somewhere along the way, which ended up in this sequence. As it turns out, one of the best compliments I got on cinematography was from someone who had seen the film in our local theater and who said the sequence literally sheds light on how these trees are literally tortured by orchardists into maximum cherry production, and how, in fact, this kind of extreme pruning is really what shortens their lives, and not a bad metaphor for what actually happens in the film. Otherwise, most of the orchard was shot on intuition and instinct. So, not exactly luck or serendipity, but consider the bedroom shot, where our main character is waking up after a night of what we think is a disturbing dream. Having the camera low to the floor, shooting up at an odd angle, and effectively displacing the character within the frame, in retrospect, was the right intuitive call, because the character literally being off-center in his life, and because of whose POV the camera might be, namely the creature that maybe lives in an abandoned swimming pool underneath the building. Or in this scene, where the main character comes to visit his old buddy, and they end up drinking beer in old lawn chairs in the backyard, all thanks to an acquaintance who agreed to let us use their property, but where we really had no idea what we would find when we got there. In fact, we were initially thinking we would be shooting inside. Upon surveying the setting, though, it was just obvious how the scene could unfold, and we went with it. Or consider this shot from Saltburn. It's a fair bet that this stunning shot of Oliver's upside-down reflection off a candlelit table was the product of the same kind of let's just see what we see on-set serendipity that went a long way in the orchard, as in the setup of the final confrontation between Kate and Lucas.
The drugs are not an issue.
Where the all-natural lighting creates almost a halo effect around the characters against these blood-red walls. Having taken on color grading as part of my duties as cinematographer on the orchard, I now see how integral this more technical component of final editing, rendering, and delivery really is. Indeed, like most industry people who rarely actually watch a movie and instead look at them, observing choices made and approaches taken in the film, it is now impossible for me to not notice when something has been maybe rushed through production. And color grading, or lack thereof, is often the giveaway. Indeed, if there's an unsung below-the-line hero in filmmaking, it's the colorist, whose work that is so critical to a film is usually acknowledged, if at all, only near the end of the credits. With exceptions, of course, such as this beautiful David Gilmour concert video shot in Pompeii, released in 2017, where colorist James Tonkin is near the top of the list. Color, in many ways, is the science of cinematography, and in my humble opinion, can make or break a film. Consider, for example, the film Maverick Top Gun, yet another dreaded sequel I went to see last summer like everyone else now over 50, who was there in 1985 or something, when the original came out and Tony Scott's use of color just blew us away. From a color point of view, the sequel was at very least a masterclass in color correction, especially these night shots with artificial lights, with the need to secure and balance skin tones. It completely changed my entire perception of the film as a whole. or 2001: A Space Odyssey, a film we watched recently after some decades, and feeling like I just had a blood transfusion. The color in this remastered and brilliant film is so rich and beautifully orchestrated that it's almost its own spiritual element. And of course, not to mention Lawrence of Arabia, Apocalypse Now, The Deer Hunter, Alien, but also sleepers like The X-Files, Fight the Future, or Breaking Bad on almost any given episode. Finally, and to wrap up, I think the upshot from our experience in making The Orchard, again, resonates with the old saying, it's not the camera, it's the photographer. Building on innate talent and experience requires only that you have equipment that is good enough, even if the ultimate goal is to go bigger and better. And since this series of videos is as much a celebration of the dive in and see what happens school of filmmaking as it is about all the high watermark influences and so on, we stand as confirmation that even two old farts can make a go of it. Thanks for watching and subscribing. See you in the next segment.